meteoroids, meteors, and meteorites. Have you ever wondered what the difference is? We're going to look at all three of those. First, let's start off with a meteoroid. A meteoroid is a rock in space. More specifically, it's a rock in our solar system. And usually they're not really big. They can be up to 10 meters long, but usually they are much smaller. So it's a rock that's out in our solar system, and as the Earth is going around the sun, we run into the path of these meteoroids pretty regularly. So if this is our Earth right here, and here we are standing on the Earth, looking up at space. It's so happy. Right, and our Earth also has an atmosphere. So our atmosphere really is about the thickness in proportion to a skin on an apple. So you know how thick a skin is on an apple. That's about how thick our atmosphere is to our Earth. I'm making it much bigger on here so I can show what happens, what the difference between a meteoroid, a meteor, and a meteorite. So this rock can, as we're going through our solar system, we intercept its path, and as out here, in this area out here, there's no air. So there's no friction as the rock is moving around. As it comes into our atmosphere, now it's moving against all of the gas that we have in our atmosphere, and we do get friction. So now we're getting some friction here, and this meteoroid turns into a meteor. It starts to burn up because it's now, just like when you rub your hands together really fast, it starts to get warm. This meteoroid is now hitting our atmosphere and rubbing against all of those gases, becoming very, very hot, and it actually ignites, catches on fire, and usually burns up in our atmosphere. We don't usually talk about meteors unless you're talking about a meteor shower. Sometimes you'll hear on the news the meteorologist will talk about a meteor shower. We usually refer to those meteors as shooting stars. If you've ever looked up in the sky and you see what looks to be a star that zooms across the sky, it really is not a star. What you're seeing is a meteoroid burning up in our atmosphere, and that streak of light is the rock burning up as it travels and goes away. I guess goes away, burns up. However, we do have meteoroids out here that are big enough, that 10 meters long. Meters, if you're used to saying yards and meters are comparable. They're not exactly the same thing, but they're comparable. So if you have 10 meters, it's about 10 yardsticks put side by side together. And that's about the distance of some of the larger meteoroids. Most of them, again, are much, much smaller. But if we do have one of those large meteoroids, it will go into our atmosphere and burn down a little bit, but it doesn't burn up. If it doesn't burn up, it continues on its path to our Earth. And it will end up hitting the Earth. It'll be smaller than it was when it entered the atmosphere, of course, because it's burned down. When it hits our Earth, that's called a meteorite. And the way I remember meteorite is because it hits our Earth, I-T. So a meteorite hits our Earth. Meteorites can be very dangerous. We've had some that are small, like baseballs, hit. We've had some that are the size of a train car that hit. The bigger they are, you can imagine it causes more damage, kicks up more dust into our atmosphere. But most of the time, the meteorites that hit our Earth are just little dust particles from when the meteor was streaking across the sky and it burned up, and then the dust particles fall, and you don't even notice them at all. If you've heard of a couple of other terms, an asteroid, very quickly, an asteroid is along the same lines as a meteoroid. It just usually is much, much bigger. Asteroids actually can have their own path around the sun in what's called the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. So an asteroid is a rock. It's made up of the same material as a meteoroid. It's just much larger. And the other term that you might have heard is a comet. A comet, actually, when it breaks down, can turn into a meteoroid. That's where we think a lot of the meteoroids come from, is the comet breaking down. Comets are actually made up of ice and dust particles. So if you've ever been in a cold climate and you have seen big semi-trucks driving in snow and ice, and you look on those mud flaps, there's a huge dirty ice chunk that's on the back of those mud flaps. If you were to kick that off, that is what is the composition or comparable composition to what a comet is. It's ice and dust, and as it travels around the sun, it will burn away. The ice will start to melt, the dust particles will start to burn off or dislodge, and then you can get your meteoroid from something like that. So there you have it. Meteoroids, meteors, and meteorites. It can all be the same rock.